Anecdote. It's summer 2020, COVID in full force, the world's going crazy. I'm cooped up in the city wondering why my neighbors are calling the cops on my other neighbors for too many cars in the driveway, why I can't trust personal friends to not rat me out, why I thought we were Americans who stood up for what's right, instead we're all just blowing in the wind. So I kind of went into a crazy mode, started reading books in an attempt to try to make sense of the world. Maybe we can or maybe we can't actually make sense of the world, but I wanted to try. Stumbled on the Fourth Turning book, written in the 90s by two demographers and historians, Neil Howe and Bill Strauss, same year as The Sovereign Individual, which is required reading as far as I'm concerned. These two books come out, both equally tell the future, pretty wild to see, and they break down essentially an 80 to 90 year cycle based on demography, based on generational cycles. So by studying American history, they observed patterns that emerged out of history. They didn't go looking for the patterns, they stumbled into them. And what they found is that they defined a generational cycle, which they give in repeating order 4 different archetypes, hero, nomad, artist, etc. Those 4 archetypes repeat every 20, 25 years. And each archetype, depending on the stage of life they're in, are they a young person, are they middle age, are they later age? Depending on the stage of life, that constellation of the archetypes creates a mood, and that mood is relatively easy to predict how society will respond to their environment. So if there's a catalyst in the environment, is our mood like we're just finished fighting a war and we're all chilling after World War II, in which case we don't want to do anything crazy, no changes, we want white picket fence, leave it to Beaver, just relax? Or is it a period where our institutions are crumbling? We look around and we say, hey, the exterior world is falling apart, like right now, in which case humanity has this mood of, we're going off the rails, we need to make extreme sacrifice, we need to collectivize now in an attempt to try and solve this greater problem. And we can go into all these different things, but that's probably the shortest way I can possibly give the thesis. I think everyone here is familiar with it, and most of your listeners have heard us blab about this. So let's start with that.
Yeah, Dave, are you familiar with the theory? And maybe what is your kind of take on what Brandon said there, and like how well do you understand the theory, and maybe your reaction?
Well, I read it quite a few years ago, so it's a little, but I've been reading a lot of Jim Quinn, and he's been talking about it for years, and so I get updates all the time. What's interesting about it is it's as they emphasize, bad things happen in every one of these quarters, I would call it. Maybe what's the name for it? I can't even remember what the names are called, but these turnings, yeah. But it's the fourth turning when society goes batshit. And so it's not so much what happened. So this idea of looking for a trigger is less important. It's really about just society starting to react to bad things in a very bad way. The other thing, they wrote it in 96 and said the next one ought to come around 2010. And we're sitting there going, oh, that was a pretty good call, wasn't it? So a lot of debate about when did it start, which it's not what was the trigger, but just what's the starting point. And, the financial crisis, you could argue, was it. I would actually be a little more precise and say maybe it started when the response to the financial crisis was poor. And then society said, okay, that's not fair that the bankers got all the money. And then they started really getting pissed off.
Yeah, I think that's right. Neil defines it as 0809 GFC as the line, but these are social phenomenons. These are not black and white.
They're vague. They're blurry. Yeah,
that's right. And the analog is the previous fourth turning he defines as 1929 to 1945. So obviously we have the stock market collapse, we have the Great Depression, then we have FDR take power. And a key part of fourth turnings is that on the institutional level, we start to do things that maybe 10 years prior would be totally unthinkable. So what does FDR do? He's deficit spending. He creates FDIC. Hey, don't worry, the banks are going to be fine. He creates social security, NATO, World Bank, IMF, ultimately Bretton Woods, obviously World War II.
He grabs the gold.
Yeah, exactly. 1933.
And he values the gold. Yeah.
That's right. All that happens and it's totally unthinkable. Another parallel for this group is that historically in fourth turnings, we leave hard money and we go to soft money. And so there's kind of this little shift where in chaos mode, we want soft money so we can spend that money to solve problems.
So working backwards even, so there's one they missed actually. So working backwards, they kind of don't emphasize it so much, but the Civil War, one would argue, was the previous 80-year fourth turning. The one they missed, I think, unless I missed it, what happened in 1690? We burned witches. So society was this very small thing, so it's not going to be as huge as World War II. But we started doing batshit crazy stuff. We got very superstitious. And so I would argue that fourth turning was missed by Strauss and Howe.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think he goes back that far.
Well, no,
but it's an interesting
one. They
one.
go back all the way to the Glorious Revolution. And I mean, they track it back into the 1200, 1300, 1400s. I don't have them at the tip of my fingers, but they've done it in Europe, and you can kind of correlate. I don't know if they talked about the witches, but obviously the American Revolution was the one prior to the Civil War. The thing that's interesting about the Civil War is it was kind of short. I mean, unless you consider that maybe it started with the caning of that senator in like 1845, but you know, the war broke out in 1860. It was over in 1865. But I'm assuming that because afterwards they didn't they had sharecroppers and everything else. I mean, there was a lot of turmoil for all maybe 20 or 30 years around the Civil War, right?
Yeah, you could argue the carpetbaggers were the extension of the fourth turning.
Exactly. I think I agree with the thesis. I mean, to me, it was very clear that the beginning was 2008, and whether it was the crisis itself or the reaction to the crisis, fuzzy lines, but that was clearly it. And these things tend to last 20 to 30 years, which would imply that 2028 we would have resolution, or at the longest case, maybe 2030. We'd have resolution, and that kind of fits with my sense of when fiat currency fails. I tend to think if I had to model it out, I would say what I think is going to happen here is Trump's going to do his best to make things right. He can't undo 50 years of bad shit. The markets are all going to go down, inflation's going to go up, and we're going to have the worst of both worlds. We're going to have an inflationary depression or inflationary downturn. And so in 4 years, what will happen is Team Blue will come along and they'll promise free money and stimmies and all the other good stuff. And Trump, the red team will lose. And then those guys are going to put Stephanie Kelton in as the Treasury Secretary, and they're going to run huge deficits, print tons of money, and we become South America / Israel / whatever. At a worst outcome, Weimar, and the currency outright fails sometime between 28 and 2032 in the next Democratic administration. Unless we do a reset. I mean, the only optimistic outcome I can see here is that Bessent gets it, and Bessent and Trump are courageous enough to try and do a reset in this 4-year period.
Here's a question. I think everybody's kind of agreed on the timeline, kind of agreed on the theory. I haven't read the book, but I agree with the theory that there are historical blind spots where basically nobody alive has seen these kind of circumstances, and so we fall into all the same pitfalls that we've fallen into before. That makes total sense, right? If you look at the timeline that Brandon outlined, we're coming up on the peak, and in this theory, and the peak was the Civil War, the peak was World War II beforehand. What is the peak this time? Is it economic collapse, or is it something that looks more like the fall of the American Republic and giving way to an American Caesar, and we get a dictator, right? It could, to me, it's very unclear what the climax of this could be.
Well, the outcome, I agree with you, HODL. I think the outcome is very unclear, but I think the key driving issue has got to be the monetary system. I mean, we've reached, it's Lynn's "Nothing Stops This Train." We've reached the end of the print and inflate road. And we're now behaving like a third world country, and play third world games, get third world results. Your currency inflates massively.
What if that's the goal, the controlled demolition of the American economy and the American sort of standard of living? So
that's my theory.
Maybe there is no print, maybe it's the big drain, and they let us all just suffer until we beg for the CBDC print. But maybe there's no print for a long time to make us just crush the economy, crush morale, all of it.
I think that's possible, but when I look at the Fed and I look at the choices they have, remember, the people in the government, their number one job is just to keep the system going, keep getting reelected, and take advantage of their privilege to make themselves wealthy. And what you're kind of describing, Cedric, is a massive depression, just massive, and kind of fighting in the streets sort of stuff, which I suppose is possible. But I think at the end of the day that the average politician faced with that potential outcome versus printing the money to keep things going, they'll print every time. I mean, that's my belief. Now, that doesn't mean that they will. And the system, the system is not one set of people. I mean, I know there are those who believe that, the WEF is kind of controlling all of this, and maybe they are, but I don't really think so. I think everybody just kind of acts in their own best interest, and the people who are in positions of power are going to do what they've done in the past, which is run the printer and run it hard.
With the occasional bombing of a country that turns out to work out very poorly.
Oh yeah, no, with a lot of other collateral bullshit, Dave, that you're very much aware of. I agree with that for sure.
So I think emergent. I think the system goes emergent, which HODL's point is I don't think it's predictable. There's a Heisenberg uncertainty component to this, right? So once it goes emergent, then it's like saying, what's that crowd going to do now that they've lit the torches? You go, well, we'll find out.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, the potential is a strongman arises, and I mean, in the earlier part of another fourth turning, that's what led to Hitler rising to power, right?
Right. It kind of feels like all these different scenarios are on the table, right?
He was going to make Germany great again, and the Jews were the ones who had screwed everybody by printing all the money in Weimar, and so therefore we got to kill the Jews. And
there's another theory I was wondering about, just this. I'm a tangential thinker, I'm told, which means that I need an ADHD drug. I was wondering if Hitler had a tactical reason for the Holocaust. Not to say he's not a sick fuck, right? I'm in no way endorsing it, but did he have a tactical reason? I don't think it was to unify Germany, because it was kind of on the side that he did it. And I was wondering if you look at the story, the mega bankers fund every war. They funded the Russian Revolution. They funded the Soviet Union. Could it be that Hitler, who I do believe viewed the Soviets as his biggest risk, period, bar none, is it possible his goal was to destroy the financial power base of the Soviets by destroying the Jewish financial base?
It's an interesting thought. It's possible.
Well, then I ran into a quote by Putin, who said, I look forward to future generations not being under the shackles of the Rothschilds. And I go, that's such a weird quote. And then it got fact checked. And who'd they ask? The Rothschilds. So it's just a weird world. Are you pretty sure
he said that, Dave, or is that one of
No, that's why I went looking for an origin of it, and I couldn't find the origin except the Rothschilds saying that's not true.
I think going back to what is the peak in front of us, I think historically it's either a hot war abroad or some civil war internally in the US, or the Revolutionary War was kind of a hybrid between a hot war abroad and a civil war here, right? Most of the fighting was loyalists versus patriots. 5% or less was redcoat problems. And so I think we should look at the variables in front of us and make our best guess. But for sure, it's emergent. There's no confidence here. This doesn't predict anything. It just predicts that we're actually ready to go all in a total war, right? If you look at pre-World War I, I'm going to get my history slightly wrong, but the Germans sank our boat, the Lusitania or something like that. And we don't even care about it. Nothing happens. Then you go to Pearl Harbor. The next day, America is up in arms, ready to go to war immediately. Lusitania was the third turning. We're not quite ready to go all in. Pearl Harbor, fourth turning, we're instantly activated. And so I think right now the situation is, where is the little tinder fire ready to be sparked? And I'm concerned in the US, to be honest. Let's see if MAGA, Maha can unify us. But right now we're as divided as we've ever been since we've been tracking data. I saw a stat that showed 5% of marriages right now are between left and right. That's insane. 40% of Americans believe that violence is justified against your political enemies. 40% think secession's a good idea. And that's probably coming from left and right. So we're divided. We're scary here. And yes, I think that the monetary system, which seems to erupt every fourth turning, I don't know if that is the peak, but that puts pressure on all systems, right? We have 50 years of outsourcing manufacturing, gutter middle class, that creates tension here. and we have rising China, tensions abroad. And so I think all the monetary system obviously comes into play, but I think the social side needs to be considered strongly too.
Yeah, I've thought about this quite a bit, and I think it's sort of like, I've coined it the race to Hitler, which is, I think the left and the right both want their own Hitler, and they think the other side is going to do a Hitler. So you got to do a Hitler before your opponent does a Hitler so that they can't Hitler you, right? And it's like, you can see it on the right. You have figures like Curtis Yarvin who are talking about America needs a CEO, and we could have this, you got to get over the word dictator, and we could have this dictator who could be a good thing for the country. It could be like a Julius Caesar, and the Roman Republic shifts to the Roman Empire, and then we go back and forth. And then on the left, you can obviously see that they want to run it Manchurian candidate, technocrat, oligarchy style, where they have a Joe Biden puppet in there, and then who knows who's actually running the show or how things actually get done. And, in politics, like we're learning, or we're realizing that like a lot of our politics are based on sort of decorum and good vibes. And when you start playing it to the bone, you start breaking a lot of things. And I think that's one of the things, one of the trends that we're seeing. And there's only so far you can stretch out that rubber band before it snaps entirely. And like to Dave's point, it's emergent. I don't know what the result is there, but whatever's coming is not great.
No, and the one hope though is that it doesn't go kinetic, because we would lose a war against China. I mean, they couldn't invade our country because we're too heavily armed individually, but from a weapons and munitions point of view, as Groman has pointed out, 70 or 80% of our defense stuff, we need Chinese components. I mean, one of the really interesting things that's going to happen here is we're going to our defense industry is going to run out of rare earths because China has cut off shipping rare earths to us.
So it turns out I had dinner with the CEO of Chemetall, and the mayor of the city of, I think it's Gosselin or whatever. And I asked him about the rare earths. He said the rare earths are not rare. It's just that China has cut the prices so low that they basically made them unique suppliers. Now, the problem is that we all know that if all of a sudden China cuts us off, you say, how long would it take to open up a rare earth mine? And the answer is decades.
Right. That's the problem.
And so it doesn't matter if we have them, we ain't going to get them. If China cut us off today, we'd actually be starving.
Well, we are. I mean, rare earths, they did cut us off. I mean, they said that. And so that's a fact. And that's.
But I mean, all our cars would stop working and we wouldn't be able to repair them. And, I mean.
We'll see. I mean, so the thing that's different about this fourth turning versus other ones is that in this one, we actually have the ability to destroy the entire planet and the human race, which is a scary thought, but it's actually somewhat of a comforting thought in the sense that now, well, think about it, no, Dave, I'm serious. Now having that ability, it actually limits what all-out war can look like. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
hopefully.
Well, if you run the game theory on China and America going to war, two superpowers with the largest nuclear arsenals on Earth, you come to the conclusion actually that the safest place to be is in mainland China or in mainland America, and that probably it'll be a naval conflict between the two superpowers in the South China Sea, right? So like that's the case for mutually assured destruction.
Did anyone read Annie Jacobson's Nuclear War?
Not yet.
So she starts out, and if I wasn't going to read it, but then too many guys like Jeff Sachs says it's brilliant, so I had to go read it. She starts out with the first flash. She talks to all these military guys, digs as deep as she can. Starts out with the first flash coming out of North Korea. And she said within 1 second, it's been identified as an ICBM that's been launched. And she goes second by second and minute by minute what happens, who gets called where, who's on what plane, where are they going. And her conclusion is, to be overly precise, she says 78 minutes later, the world has been destroyed.
Back to warfare, though. I see the emergence of warfare, whatever we're calling the new warfare, drone swarms, directed energy weapons to take down drone swarms, cyber attacks, economic warfare, psyops, etc.
Biological.
So I think what we're going to, biological, I expect something more like a Cold War 2.0 with China, where both sides maintain plausible deniability, and it's more regional skirmishes and trying to manage perceptions around it. Like try to keep economics intact while also maneuvering, under the radar against your enemy. I think that's already happening now.
Yeah, how much of COVID was a new form of non-kinetic, not warfare, but sort of a way to create the sense of warfare-like conditions for society so that they can financially paper over things.
Exactly right. And I think that's a key point, just tying back to the theory. People say, are you predicting a war? Is this theory all doomerism? And the answer is no. We just need a catalyst sufficiently large enough to charge up the masses to make massive shift. It just so happens that historically it's been war. But could it be this like subversive type warfare? And is that enough to mobilize the troops? Maybe. But I'm personally not worried about US-China nuclear war. I think both parties will be sophisticated enough to get through it. And I also don't know how much Chinese supply chains matter except for on drone components, because we don't need...
Yeah, the drone shit scares the hell out of me. They've got these little drones that can home in on hot people. I mean, we couldn't fight a drone army, and they've got more drone technology than we do. That whole thing's scary, but I don't think they're evil, and I don't think they want to take over the United States. I think you know, Jordy Visser did a really great job. He had a podcast where he said something along, you know, China and America are getting a divorce, and global trade are the kids. and it was a really great metaphor and a great line, because we really need them because they sell us cheap shit, and you know, we're not going to sit here and put together iPhones. I mean, did you see any of those Chinese AI videos of all the, you know, the fat slobs trying to put together iPhones? It was awful, evil stuff. And in turn, you know, they've got a population, you know, they've got a communist population that's beaten down, that, you know, is counting on having jobs and money and so forth. And you know, if we kill all the trade, you know, they're going to have a very unhappy bunch of people there that, you know, might decide whether they want to start questioning the whole communist regime, and, you know, they might have another Tiananmen thing, which is, I think, their biggest fear. So they've got to, both sides really have to kind of try and figure out a way to, you know, to negotiate a solution. These two parents, I mean, on behalf of the kids, these two parents have to kind of work it out, you know, and I think we probably will. You know, I'm not sure that Trump's rhetoric and throwing a bomb into the, you know, global trade picture was a good idea, but he did it. And fortunately, Besant's now talked him back down, walked him back. You know, and I mean, the problem is that this is a 50-year problem, right? Fiat currency has been ruining the world since 1971. You can't solve it in one presidential administration. You just can't. You know,
So before you guys rudely interrupted me with this spaces-like thing, I was listening. I want to give a heads up to people. Stephanie Pomboy and Adam Taggart are talking to Ted Seidel about the pension crisis, and the numbers are way scarier than I thought. And I wrote about the pension crisis that literally was uploaded verbatim to Solari. So I know quite a bit about the pension crisis. This was awfulness. The pensions are beyond screwed, just beyond screwed. There's just no way out. And that's going to cause trouble beyond comprehension.
Well, and we can't cut back Social Security expenses in the regular way, which would be to, you know, means test and, you know, raise the age and all that kind of stuff. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do it in real terms. We're just going to make it so that your $4,000 or $3,000 Social Security check doesn't buy shit. You know, depreciate the purchasing power of the currency by 80%, and, you know, you'll get your Social Security check. It won't cover much. You know, I mean, they've got to do a monetary reset, and the $64,000 question is, how do they do it? I mean, I hate Roosevelt in so many ways. But actually, one thing he did that was intelligent was when he devalued the dollar versus gold in 33 and 34. And 34, that showed they had the best recovery of the entire 10-year period in 34 when he did that. Now then, you know, then the Smoot-Hawley stuff kicked in, and they didn't let, you know, there were a lot of laws that didn't let the labor prices set correctly and so on and so forth. And that's why it dragged on for so long. But if we had really enlightened leadership and we would do a one-time reset here to sound money, I think, you know, that's the thing to do. And furthermore, the strategic thing to do, as Jason Lowery has pointed out, and as most of the Bitcoiners on this call know, would be to leapfrog them and reset to Bitcoin and let them go with gold. You know.
Well, and then Matt Pines floated the idea of actively doing that, and instead of letting it passively happen, you actively dump the gold into the market and devalue the gold at the same time you monetize the Bitcoin.
And that's kind of what Saylor said. Let's sell the gold and then use it to buy Bitcoin. There's one small problem with that, and I think it's fascinating. Remember how Trump and Besant were talking about, yeah, we're going to go audit the gold. Notice how that's gotten really, really quiet. I mean, my sense is they got read in about what's really going on with the gold. And I have a lot of friends, names I don't want to name, but one guy who's a very senior guy in London who I was with a few weeks ago, and he knew people in the Johnson administration. There's no doubt in his mind, and there's documentation to prove that Johnson shipped gold to the London gold pool between 1962 and 1968, and it never came back. And Johnson felt screwed by that because they promised it would come back and it didn't. So Fort Knox is deficient.
They also said they were going to audit the Bitcoin.
Do you think it's
too.
deficient, or do you think we don't own it?
Well, that's the matter. Possession's 9/10, Dave. If we have it there, if we sold a lot of paper against it, that doesn't matter. We can just renege on those contracts.
Right. So
what
you
really
think that
matters
actually the bar counts are down? You think the bar
That's
counts
right.
are down?
To me, what matters, in a war, in a financial war, what matters, possession will be 9/10. So yeah, we might have loaned some of it out too on paper, but that doesn't matter.
Well, it could be that in the current regime, that 50% of it is owned by other countries.
Absolutely.
Now, I agree with you.
And we can also say tough shit. We're not honoring that.
No, I got that. I just wanted to know which one you were saying.
I think the bars are deficient by definition.
You remember when they said the bars were peeling and shit like that? Do you remember those stories from about 6 or 7 years ago?
Here's a great data point. Remember this was probably 10 years ago. Remember when Germany asked for a lot of their gold back?
And we couldn't give it to them.
We told them it could take them 7 years, and we actually got it back to them. They were satisfied. But guess what? In theory, they sent it to us after the war, with the notion being we want to send it over there in case Russia overruns us. We want you to have our gold. So that's why they did it. Well, we didn't send, and they sent bars. It's gold comes in bars and with hallmarks and everything else. You can tell which bar is which. We didn't send them back what they sent us. We sent them back gold. It's not, they had the right to say, give me bar number 1, 2, 3, because that's what I sent to you. We didn't give them bar number 1, 2, 3. We gave them a bar, but not the one they sent us. So that further cements the suspiciousness of it all. And then there's an analyst named Ronan Manley who's on Twitter. I highly recommend you all follow. He's probably the deepest guy in the gold market, and he dug into some of the paperwork on it all. And there's just no doubt in my mind that we just don't have all that gold. But by the way, though, that may be why all the gold imports in the U.S. have been surging so much recently. Maybe Bessent and Trump said to themselves, all right, if we're thinking of going, remember, you got to kind of read the clues. It was really important when last summer Bessent said, this monetary system is unbalanced and not working, and we need to change it. And I think it needs to be changed in a way that looks something like Bretton Woods, and I want to be at the table when that occurs. Now, that to me, that's a very strong signal that he understands Triffin's dilemma and he knows we got to fix it. And I know Trump isn't smart enough to understand it on his own, but I also know we've heard that, when Trump came in and interviewed Bessent to have the role as Treasury Secretary, he said, how the hell are we going to get out of this? How are we going to deal with this debt? What are we going to do? And my sense is Bessent, is thinking we got to do a monetary reset here. And then he said, we're going to do an audit of Fort Knox and the gold. Well, he got read in and he did kind of an informal audit and realized, oh, fuck, we don't have what we say we have. So now all the imports are coming back. This is just Larry's crazy theory. I don't know if any of this is true.
Bessent also assured us that it does get audited and we know we have it. He said that.
Did he? I don't know.
Yeah, he did.
Early on he did. But he's been real quiet about it recently. Like I say, I think he got read in.
I think something that Bessent knows here is that you can't, one of Trump's ambitions is to rehome the American manufacturing base, and that's part of what tariffs are about, at least in Trump's mind. And, I think Bessent knows that you can't rehome the American manufacturing base without solving Triffin's dilemma. And that if our chief export is dollars, we're just going to keep exporting it and getting cheap plastic crap from China. And, there needs to be, it's really interesting, these comments he's made, about there needing to be a new Bretton Woods, and then saying that Bitcoin is a rising store of value. And then you think about some of the, talk about, demonetizing gold and remonetizing Bitcoin at the same time. And I don't know, do we have the minds in the government that are capable of doing that? I would love to see that happen. To me, that's the preferred outcome.
I think Bessent has it. What I don't know is if they have the political courage to do it.
Right. It's a big move. Big bold.
It's an enormous move, and to get from here to there, and the entire Keynesian establishment's going to go absolutely batshit. This is the stupidest thing ever, proposed. And so, it is what it is.
By the way, if we do end up doing that, 100% the NSA invented Bitcoin. If that move
I don't know about that. I don't think the NSA invented Bitcoin, but maybe they did. I don't think so. But
well, they did say alongside auditing the gold, they were going to audit the Bitcoin. And what if they come up with 1 million coins in this audit? because the NSA invented
How
Bitcoin.
many
It has those
coins are there
wallets. I mean,
supposed to be? How many are there supposed
well, there's
to
a
be
million
right now?
coins supposedly missing in Satoshi's wallets. So that's like a million coins I'm referring
They're
to.
supposed to
that
have like, yeah, the U.S. government has like 180,000, but some of them
No,
are.
they have over 210. They have over 200, and we haven't heard much about where those are either, and who's got the keys to those.